We're lined up there, and everyone's going to dash in and stake out a claim, one of those promises. It's a promised land because it's full of 10,000 promises. I wish everyone before tomorrow morning would find some promise that he's willing to stake out his claim by. You might have a whole message around that claim. If you had time, I'd have each one of you name the promise that you got. I'm going to tell you one I got 30 years ago. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he will direct thy paths. And I made this discovery that if you acknowledge him, and you, in other words, and then you look after your intentions and see they're all clear and in alignment with him, you acknowledge him, your intentions are good because you put him first, and then he will look after the results. It so happened that I had gone out to California to spend half a year to finish writing a textbook. But my real reason was to find what was the matter with me. I'd been examined by the greatest nerve specialist in the Northwest. And he said, you've inherited your mother's nervous organism and you don't have any business teaching. You must make yourself contented to do a third of a man's work. Spend your life just doing a third of a man's work. Now that wasn't the kind of a life I wanted to lead. So I lined up in front of the promised land and dashed in and staked out a claim. And there it was. And when you stake out a claim, it's always interesting. We have 300 acres down in Florida that we hope someday to have 1,000 people, ideal CFO type of people, go in and each take a third of an acre and get it for $500 or $600, and everyone have an avocado tree, an orange tree, and a grapefruit tree. And all you do is to sink a little, dig down, and you have your own water system. And so we hope someday to have a lot of folks down there and have everybody have his vine and his fig tree. Now when you go into a place and you find you've got a little land, got a little lot, and you make a study of what can be raised on it. And I remember when I married, we bought our first lot and we built a house on it. And then we planned our little garden and everything that we wanted to raise. And I, having always lived in an apple orchard, I sent for 4 apple trees and 2 plum trees. I'm glad I did. It took a number of years, 5 or 6 years, but we've lived there for 40 years. And we've been enjoying those apples all those years. But if we'd planted some orange trees up in Minnesota, we wouldn't have had the right kind of land for that. So grab hold of a promise and see what you can do. And so it happened that because I was condemned to do a third of a man's work, and the rest of my life, 30 years ago, I found a claim that I staked, and I decided I would act upon it, acknowledge him in all my ways, and then depend him on directing the paths. So I came back, and I went to every class like I'm coming here, not with any sense of responsibility or strain at all. I'd always come with a great sense of responsibility and strain, with a conscientious feeling I must teach this, ram the grammar in this way and that way and the other way, and I'd be exhausted at the end of the day. But now I found a new claim. I'd staked my claim. All I had to do is to acknowledge him in all my ways, step in and find there's the kingdom of heaven right there, and that He'd direct the paths. And then found another passage, commit thy ways unto the Lord, trust also in Him, and He will bring it to pass. So He's my senior partner. And the results became glorious. Classes doubled in size. They wanted to come to a cheery-faced teacher that was happy about his work and made them happy. And they did twice as good work. The results were twice as good. And when the day had ended, I hadn't done any work. I had just been going to a party after party. If they just passed the ice cream and cake, I'd known it was a party. But because I hadn't done any work, I sat down and wrote an article for the Atlantic Monthly just for fun. Just because I had so much fun doing it, they accepted it. Then the Presbyterians wanted me to come out and tell them what had happened to me. And I had such a good time. The Methodists heard about it. They wanted to have somebody come in and tell them funny stories and what a good time I was having. So the Methodists had me, and then the Baptists and the Episcopalians. Well, I found after a while I was giving about 7 talks a week. I was doing full-time teaching, full-time writing. I was doing 3 men's work instead of a third of a man's work, so I ran around to this great nerve specialist to tell him a new secret I discovered that I thought would help him. But his secretary said he died while you were gone. So Bob Fisher drove me at a breakneck race out here as fast as he could, that I could bring you this news before you'd all died of the heat or something. And I'm glad I found you all safe and sound. Well, now I was getting right down to this, stating out a claim. I really mean it. I'd like to pause for just a minute and have about 3 claims mentioned. Put your hand up first and then tell me what verse from the Bible you found good.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
You're going to have the same one. Now, they're going to fight over that claim, but folks, there's always enough of that for 2. Those who call, I will answer. Let's have another one. He healeth all our diseases. Well, now, he states out some claims. We can do all things through Him whose health strengtheneth me. And whenever He calls, we will answer, and He'll heal all our diseases. Now, that's all going to start happening tonight. My classes went so much better that I could have gotten conceited about it. But I made that mistake when I was a boy. I trusted the Lord tremendously when I was about 15. And things went so gloriously that after all I began to take credit, and I lost my way, and I hadn't found it for all those years. So I would just give the Lord all the credit. Once in a while the day didn't go so well and the results weren't so good. Did I go off in a corner and mope like I used to? No, I just said, Lord, you didn't do a very good job today. No, you didn't do a very good job. I hope you'll do better tomorrow. And by shoving all the praise on Him and the little tiny blame, responsibility, that's what He wanted. He didn't want you to go off and worry, spoil the whole thing. I wasn't quite as blunt as that. I just said, we didn't do quite so well. But He understood. He was very understanding. Hello there, Rufus. Nice to see you. Take a rocking chair and make yourself comfortable. Now with Rufus and Mary and all this team here, you're going to have plenty of fresh air. And you need a little more turned on. Rufus can do it. And the ceiling will have to just rise up, and it won't have any ceiling here after they get going. For we believe in taking off all limits. That's why I wanted you to stake out a claim and get sort of your feet on the ground, every one of you. Be sure and do that. Now, that's your duty, to get hold of some passage in the Scriptures that you can hang on to. Because we're going to be like balloons beginning tomorrow, and we'll just start going up. But we'll not really go that great height until the prayer groups start in the afternoon. The basis of what we do here are prayer groups. And beyond that, everything else has its fitting place. Some of you, because a third of you are here for the first time, may wonder why we call it the Camp Farthest Out. Somebody asked the secretary, they saw me coming along, they said, "Who is this Father Stout anyway?" And this actually happened when a tall, long, cadaverous gentleman said he'd like to come, but he understood it was just a camp for the stout. But it is for the stout of heart, for the stout of limb, and for the stout of mind. But we want to go farther out than the intellect. It goes far out. One of the banes of our religious life that scares a lot of folks is that so many folks go farther out, but they don't go far enough. They go out into the psychic realm. They go out in a whole lot of them, maybe some of them be in the cults, and some of them with some inadequate stopping place. That you got to just all believe in the second coming in a certain way, or you're lost. Or you got to be baptized in a certain way, or you're lost. Or you haven't got the Holy Spirit unless you can talk in tongues, or you're lost. You've got to join the Catholic Church, or you're lost. They go out into the vestibules. All those things are valuable. I mean, baptism is valuable. For those who can talk in tongues, it's valuable. But they're just vestibules, and there's lots of other vestibules. And the vestibules are merely a means to an end. They go farther out than the mere intellect. But when you go farthest out, you go where Christ is. You go again out in the very center, the highest. And you go beyond the conscious mind, beyond the subconscious mind, into the superconscious mind. And there we don't stop until we go way out there, and then we find, from that vantage point, that all the promises are real. When you stake out your claim, you'll find those promises, every one of them is real and meant to come true. I was on an island, farthest out, off the coast of Maine. And I sat there just 25 years ago, and I watched the ocean rolling in. I was impressed by the tremendous, irresistible power of the ocean, and I've discovered the power lay in the fact that it was utterly relaxed. Now, the earth was solid and fastened. It could be eaten and eroded away. It could be battered down. It could, up on the high cliff, it could laugh at the ocean and say, "You can't touch me." In that night, or the hot sun that day, the sun would draw a lot of that ocean up in there, and that night it came thundering down all over the cliffs and splashed in his face and said, "See, I can overcome you anytime I want to." And I found that to be as utterly relaxed as that, to be lifted up and roll down over your troubles, come up over them, and then overcome them, I thought it just the glory of it just thrilled me. To get 100 people out here, away from the neighbor's gossip, away from the telephone, away from the League of Nations. And if it had any Senator McCarthy's in those days, get away from the Senator McCarthy's. Get away from all the nuisances. And then all learn how to fall into balance. Get so relaxed. Fall into balance physically, mentally, and spiritually. In the course of this week, in our prayer groups, I'm going to throw out a challenge to you all, that every one of you have something that no one else has. A man named Dr. Snow took photographs of 4,000 snowflakes. And every snowflake was perfect, symmetrical, with a marvelous design, and no two the same. And that's the way with you. If we could turn on an inner soul photographer loose on you folks, we'd find that every one of you is perfect. The design was just marvelous. And no two are the same, but what is it? Well, Rufus has more of the Holy Spirit, I think, than anybody I've ever met. He's got more than I have. Mary Light can express her love and her joy more completely than I can. And I can just go down the line. I could just begin right at the beginning and tell you how each one of you had something better than I have. And they say, well, then what business do you have to be up here? Well, I'm going to tell you what my line is. I have an imagination, more imagination than anybody in America. I've surrendered it utterly to God, and whenever I daydream a thing, it comes true. And before the week's up, I wish you'd learn how to daydream, my secret. I also find, too, that if I can get hold of a parable, Jesus had imagination, he put everything in short stories. After he gave the Sermon on the Mount, he didn't talk in sermons anymore, he talked in short stories with imagination. When I can get a thing in a short story, and I get it into a parable, and I can see it with my imagination and surrender it, and apply it to this problem, that problem can be taken care of. I'll admit that's my only method. I mean, I don't depend upon anointing you with oil like Episcopalian rectors do, and it says here that if you want to heal, one good way is to anoint them with oil. Well, I don't do that. I don't live on that. I don't feel that's so essential. There are a lot of methods that other people can use that can use more effectively than I can. And I won't stop to tell you all those limitations, but I want to tell you this. When I was out on that island and I saw the power of that relaxation and I saw a thing whole, that's another thing. If you want to daydream a thing, don't stop with it halfway. If you take a peach seed and you want to plant it, don't take a hammer and pound it up into 1,000 little pieces and throw half of them away and then plant and expect anything. I have found you've got to put the whole seed in the ground. And I have found that when you daydream a thing, you shouldn't stop until you see it whole. And I saw it whole, that this was to be a camp where folks would fall into balance, something that they never did anywhere else physically. And I found that the only words in the Old Testament used for prayer come from the stem, meaning to dance in the presence of the Lord. All the earlier praying in the world was done with the body taking part. I love the way the American Indians take this stance with their hands back and they look up. I rather envy the Mohammedans because they never suffer from indigestion. They don't have to take osteopathy treatments because 5 times a day they spread their rug down, aim toward Mecca and get down their knees, and then they salam clear to the ground, the finest kind of exercise for their whole system. They pray with their bodies. And so we learn how to take monotony out of our camps. People say, you come out here to learn how to pray. You pray all day, I suppose. Now, you folks don't know you're praying all day, but you will be if you follow our program. And when you get out there in those rhythms or in those devotion through motion, you'll find that you'll be relaxing your brain and your lips and all that from the ordinary kind of praying, and before it's over, you'll feel like you're right in tune with God. And then you'll sit down and God talk to you. In the creative painting, when he takes the brush and he helps to paint a lot of your complexes out. Now, we aren't going to tell you about that, but many folks get all their problems solved. Folks have been going to psychiatrists, spending $100 a week, going to a psychiatrist for 2 years. One woman went for 2 years. I was speaking at Fosdick's church 25 years ago. She said she spent $10,000 in psychiatrists. I said, you come to Camp Farthest Out. And she painted out all her problems without her knowing it, and it's cured in 3 weeks. We used to have camps around 3 weeks. And then you say, give me a pen and help me write this poem, and what happens? When you go back to your business or consultation, whatever it is, you'll find that God will think through you more wisely because you had a little half-hour exercise every day, letting Him do the writing through you, and then you share it with the others, and in that sharing, you get acquainted with the souls, not only the minds, but the souls of everyone here. It's the most wonderful thing. And another thing, one of the things that Jesus said right here in the Sermon on the Mount, the place to begin is as the poor in spirit. Be willing to be trampled on. And blessed are they that mourn, and blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Now, how can you get those three? We can beg you and argue and exhort you to become meek and poor in spirit. If you're poor in spirit, you'll inherit the kingdom. If you're meek, you'll inherit the earth. Then you won't do it. But you come to one writing class, and then because you want to be a good sport, and you get up and read the poorest little dribble anyone ever had to listen to, and you make your head to be so meek, you're willing to get up and just show what a poor writer you are, and can't even apologize about it. Why, you start to inherit the earth right away. And you become so poor in spirit after some things you've done, some of the daubs you put on the creative painting, and then you have to interpret it, that you begin to inherit the kingdom right away. And after you've been willing to meet that test, then you know what the Camps Farthest Out is. I'm just throwing this hint out that everything has and that's why at the end of the camp he has his power in prayer. The prayer groups are tremendously powerful. Toward the end they become so powerful we meet and have a broadcast of love and prayer for the world. Yes, 25 years ago I said to a group of the students, they said, what are you daydreaming about? I was daydreaming about making a speech to the United States senators. I thought, what's wonderful to daydream of that. I didn't daydream, though, before I got this message. I didn't daydream. After I wrote The Soul's Sincere Desire, I thought, I'd like to get this into the government to pray. So I daydreamed. Well, 20 years went by. A few years ago, I was sitting at the head of a long table, and a man next to me said, well, we better introduce ourselves. I'm Senator Bankhead of Alabama. I'm Senator Ferguson of Michigan. I'm Senator Wiley of Wisconsin. And they said, now, Mr. Clark, we've heard a lot about you, and we want you to tell us how to pray. And the next year, they had me come back to the Senate Breakfast Club. I got a letter from the senator that's the closest to Eisenhower, Senator Carlson. And he said, when you're in Washington again, if you can let us know in advance, write Senator Wiley, and he'll arrange to have you speak to the senators again. Now, I'm afraid, really, to daydream for fear it might come true unless I'm sure it's the right thing. So if any of you have something that's on your heart, don't need to come and ask me for a conference. Just wait until I've given 3 talks, and you'll begin to learn my method. Now you're going to learn a lot about the Holy Spirit, and you wish you could get it. Don't go and have a lot of conferences and wear Rufus Moseley out, because you just listen to him for a few days, and you'll begin to get the Holy Spirit. You'll be in speaking terms. And if you want the wonder of God to flow into you, you just listen to Mary Light. And then the singing here isn't just singing. You'll find that it's a forms of praying and orchestration. And so I discovered what's the matter with me was that I had 2 flies in me 25 years ago. I thought I was just full of flies. There's a song, there are no flies on me. There are no flies on me. There are big flies on you, big blue bottle flies on you, but there's no flies on me. Well, now, I found that when I was a boy, we had old Jim the horse in the front yard and Brocade the cow in the backyard. The house was full of flies. I tried to protect them, and the wicked old Satan, in the form of a spider, had a spider web, and they'd get caught. I'd try to liberate them so they could live their lives. One day I said to Mother, that's a wonderful-looking raisin cake. She said, shoo, that's an angel food cake. But I discovered that there are just 2 flies. There are just 2 flies in me, and one of them is anger and one is fear. Anger is the parent of all the masculine vices and fear of all the feminine vices. And if you can swat those 2 flies, things begin to happen. Now, you may not understand that, but if you're thrifty, my wife is thrifty. She can make $1 go where other professors' wives had to make $2 go. We started on a salary of $1,300 a year, and we started making payments for a house. And it's all paid for, and we have 3 children, all educated. It's a value, but you let thrift be stung by the yellow fever mosquito of anger, it becomes covetousness, and the fear, it becomes miserliness. Love, the greatest of all the virtues, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, and have not love, I am a sounding brass and clanging cymbal. If you let love be stung by the yellow fever mosquito of anger, it becomes jealousy, and the fear, it becomes envy. So I got out my swatter and swatted those 2, and it left a vacuum. And in the vacuum there flowed a peace and a power and a poise, and I came back full of happiness and joy, light as air, began to teach my classes. And folks, I, who was told as a verdict 30 years ago that I must be content to do 1/3 of a man's work the rest of my life, I've been doing 3 men's work all those years. At the age of 71, the last 5 years, I've been turning out a book a year, and I'm going to turn out at least 1, possibly 2 books a year for the next 5 years, and it takes these professional writers 3 years to write a book, and I don't have any time to write it because I'm 9 months out speaking. I have a company, 20 employees to look after and letters to answer, and the only time I have to write is between 5 and 7 in the morning. And so I go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, wake up at 5, and I keep getting younger all the time. But the point I'm getting at is I couldn't do that if I didn't get rid of those things that blocked. Rufus Mosley is a whole lot better example than I am. He's up in the 80s. I don't know if I can hold out that long, but sometimes he's a little apologetic that he can't run races still. When I get to be 83, I'll be glad if I can just stand up here and make my tongue go. And one thing, you can stop everything else in Rufus. You never can stop his tongue. He'll explain to you, you never get rheumatism in the tongue because it's exercises. And your soul will never get lost if you can exercise your soul. Well, I found the way to get rid of anger, and I'm going to tell you right now, is to see everybody around you as perfect beings in a perfect world governed by a perfect God. Well, you'll say, well, it says they're the dust of the earth, made out of the dust of the earth. Well, that's the second chapter of Genesis, but the first chapter said, you're made after the image and likeness of God, and I take that. You heard a little boy that asked his mother, said, were we made out of dust? Yes. When we die, did we go back to dust? Yes. Well, I wish you'd come upstairs and look under my bed. I don't know whether there's somebody up there. I don't know whether he's coming or going. Well, now, that's the stupidity of thinking of mankind as just that. And to think that if you have somebody that has some terrible thing the matter with him, like Malenkov or Stalin, or Hitler. I leaned back and took a good look at Hitler, and I saw him coming into Western Germany after we had conquered the Germans, defeated them, and the French sent their black troops from Morocco up there into a city and we sent different armies and regiments in different German cities, and the ultimatum was sent to the mayor, you've got to furnish women, white women, for the brothels for these black men. Hitler got a complex upon him that I don't know. I think any Southerner, I just came from the South, would have become a whole lot worse men than Hitler. They said, I'm going to hit this thing if I have to tear the whole world asunder. Then we had a great crash in 1929. It was terrific. We thought it just affected us. But there's something we've got to pray about our capitalistic system because we think it's the best system in the world, and the communists say no. Whenever they have a crash, then it brings crashes all over the world, which is this case. A big crash came in Germany. Terrific crash. One of my friends was over there, and the mark went so low that with $1, he could hire a vessel that would hold all the students in the seminary where he was studying. he could take the whole seminary on a free trip, give them all a marvelous picnic dinner, come back. He goes over this country, one of his greatest lectures is being a millionaire for a day. Every dollar is worth $1 million. A great many Jews came in, bought up whole city blocks. Hitler became furious. It ended that there 6 million Jews were killed, innocents. But the thing to have done was to have prevented that insane phonograph record to be put on him. To me, everybody I see is a perfect being, a perfect world, like, just as good as any phonograph, but there's some awful records. I get mad sometimes when I hear them, but I don't take an axe and chop up the phonograph, the Victrola, nor do I have police come out and put it in the penitentiary for life. I just take off the record. And so there was Starr Daily. You'd have hated him 25 years ago. He was the hardest of the underworld for the Pinkertons to catch and the hardest to keep. When he was a boy of 8, he got up to speak a piece. His mother died at birth. All the mothers of the other children are there to hear their children recite, and he forgot his piece. And in horrible confusion, humiliation, he there was gasping for breath and for words, and all the children laughed. He looked to the teacher to have strength because he had no mama, and he caught her laughing too. And he walked out of that school room, out of his home, out of his life, into the underworld. For 25 years he tried to get revenge upon life because one record was put on, and all he had to have done was to remain for 25 years after his father went to heaven. And his father had spent fortunes on him, trying to change him, and nothing could change him. He was pronounced incorrigible by all the judges and psychiatrists. When the father was in heaven, his wishes, as all of our loved ones, when they step into heaven, all their wishes are multiplied in power by infinity, and the skies opened, and Jesus came right down there and changed him one night. And so, when I realized this, I began to have no anger for hatred for anybody. I find it impossible to have hatred for Stalin because every time he went to confessional and confessed some of his progressive views, the priest told it to the Tsar, and he was sent into Siberia for 7 years, where the temperature 90 degrees below zero, worked like a slave in the slave camps for years, until he was so bitter against the church, the tyranny of the church, and the tyranny of the Tsar, the tyranny of capitalism, that he's just as like an insane man. And so it is, if we've seen what some of those nations have suffered, we can see why they have those false records. Don't waste time hating them. A lieutenant in the British Army, was the best shot in the whole army in India. I was informed one night that the Bengal tiger had run off with his little baby, and he went in pursuit with many of the natives who carried torches and flashlights, and they overtook the beast at the edge of the jungle, and it was hypnotized by the lights reflecting in its eyes, so they could get a pretty good sight of its eyes, and they could see the little baby under the flashlights. It was unharmed. It had been gathered up by the folds of the garment. Now here it was, 200 yards away. No one can be sure of their shot, but this lieutenant was such a good shot. But alas, his hand was trembling so that he was just likely to shoot the baby as the tiger. Others begged him to let them do the shooting, but he knew that they'd miss. And he finally pulled the trigger, and to the surprise of all, he hit the tiger, and not the baby. One day I was left to take care of my little 3-year-old, Helen May. My wife Louise had gone to the doctor with a little Marion, 1-year-old, and Helen May went into a tantrum. I didn't know anything about tantrums. My sisters, all calm, even temperaments, they never had tantrums. I'm sure that this was a spinster aunt on the mother's side that was the cause of this tantrum. I argued, I begged, I threatened to bat her ears back. I wanted to shake her till her little teeth rattled out. And then it dawned on me, am I going to hit the baby or the Bengal tiger? Am I going to hit the tantrum or the child? So I turned to the telephone and pretended to dial.